Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're going to do It Came From the Network. The topic of this It Came From the Network: World Class Championship Wrestling from February 11th, 1984. It is marked on Peacock as Season 3, Episode 6. If you haven't watched It Came From the Network before, this is where we review all the fun, weird, wacky, sometimes good, sometimes terrible stuff you can find on formerly the WWE Network, now what is on Peacock. Jumping right in, we grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. The first thing we see is a recap we're told is of an old show, coming from just a few months before this. From October 21st, 1983, we see the Masked Avenger versus Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. Jimmy Garvin has both Sunshine and Precious with him, which is kind of cool in my opinion, because that's a very small pocket in time that they were both together. So it's kind of neat that I was able to get this. Now, the way I picked this, and I've mentioned this before, when I don't have something I want to specifically review, I go back and I just randomize, and I picked WCW or WCCW, randomized it, and got this. So it was kind of cool I got this. We see the Masked Avenger pick up a win here, who unmasks to be Gentleman Chris Adams. I'm giving this a 5. I thought it was awesome. It got to its point. It highlighted two of the best wrestlers in the history of World Class. And it advanced the feud, and they did everything. Everything in ring was awesome. The way that Jimmy Garvin sold surprise to what should have been a journeyman / jobber wrestler, being competitive with him, to the reveal of it being Chris Adams. It was just an awesome match. I enjoyed it. It was a great way to start off the show. Next up, we have Super Destroyer number 1 versus Johnny Mantell. Johnny Mantell, a mainstay of World Class, at this time what you would call a grizzled veteran. Funny thing, because the Super Destroyers have had several different iterations. This was a team that would go on to be called the Long Riders. Bill and Scott Irwin. Bill was number 1, Scott was number 2. While Bill Irwin would later be known, I believe it was Bill, one of the two Irwin brothers would later become the Goon in WWE. I digress. This was a solid match. Ends up being a draw when the other Super Destroyer gets involved. I'm giving this one a 4. I thought it was really cool. I am sorry. It wasn't a draw because it went to a time limit draw. Then the other Super Destroyer got involved. I do apologize. I'm giving this a 4. Again, another really solid match. Coming off of that, we go into Super Destroyer number 2 versus Iceman King Parsons. I've mentioned before on other shows that I've done how much I personally enjoyed Iceman King Parsons. And I kind of find it weird that he wasn't ever bigger than what he was. Because to me, even watching this now, because there's some guys that I watched back when I was a kid or back when I was younger, that now I'm like, okay, they weren't really that good. But he was. He was great. He was great in the ring. He was a great promo. This was a solid match, not quite as good as the one before or even the opening match. I'm giving it a solid 3. Iceman King Parsons picks up the win here. I thought it was good. I really enjoyed it. Now, coming from that, we get a sit-down interview with David and Kerry Von Erich, talking about their feud with the Freebirds, which, if you know anything about World Class, is the most historic feud. They talk about Kevin having an injury, suffering a concussion. Very interesting, and I kind of, knowing my wrestling history, at this point in the show, I kind of had a weird vibe going, and it felt weird watching David here. And at the end, you'll understand why. I didn't know exactly what it was. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something definitely felt weird even right here. That leads us into our main event of the evening, which was David Von Erich versus Bam Bam Terry Gordy. Supposed to be Kevin Von Erich versus Buddy Roberts, but David was swapped out because of injury, so the Freebirds swapped in Gordy for Roberts. I thought a cool piece of this was that Gordy wasn't in ring gear. He was in his pants and cowboy boots because he didn't know he was going to wrestle. Kind of a tiny little touch that made it feel special. David picks up the win on this when the Freebirds get involved. Roberts and Hayes, which then involves Kerry and Mike Von Erich coming into the ring. This was a great segment, a great match. Again, the most legendary feud in the history of World Class Championship Wrestling. Good to be dropped in right then at this time frame. I'm giving this a 5. It was very good, very, very enjoyable for me. It was something, again, anytime I could see this. This is one of the great feuds in all of wrestling. If you talk to any historian anywhere, whether it be Dave Meltzer, Jim Cornette, myself, I guess, if you want to consider me one, Tony Khan, anyone you would consider a wrestling historian, they're going to point to this as one of the greatest feuds in wrestling history, and for good reason. Everything about it was entertaining. I mean, the Fabulous Freebirds were absolutely revolutionary and one of the great tag teams and factions of all time. The Von Erich boys kind of don't get looked at for how good they are because of all the tragedy that happened to them. It's a kind of a hard watch, knowing that, looking back in history. But I'll put this feud right up there with any of them, with the Midnights and the Freebirds, with Dusty versus the Horsemen, with Steamboat and Flair, with Savage and Steamboat. Any feud you want to go down, I put this right up there with that. And again, given the match a 5, I thought it was awesome. Then we get to the final segment of the show. And this is where the weird feeling really hit me. Because I knew what happened around this time. I did not know that this was one day later. And we get, I forget what the announcer's name is. I do apologize. I'm having a brain fart right now. But he comes out and he announces David Von Erich passing away the night before on February 10th. Which is why, when I looked at this, watching the David interview, it kind of struck a chord with me. Because it wasn't long after this that David was rumored to be in contention for the NWA World Championship. Kind of ends on a downer. I've seen, and especially if you watch the Rise of the World Class documentary, it talks about how a lot of fans, these deaths happening was driving them away just because they couldn't care for people that they keep losing. This one was really, really, really sad. A sad way to end a great show. Kind of put me in a little bit of a different mood after watching awesome wrestling and an awesome television show. And I know it happens, it's part of life, death happens, but just felt like a downer, and it kind of felt like a gut punch at the end. With that being said, the show itself was fantastic. I'm giving the show a 5. I thought it was a great watch. The ending segment kind of brought us down a bit, but I get it. You have to announce that. It's kind of like you have to do a 10-bell salute when a legend passes away now. You have to put up the Raw graphic in the beginning of the show when a WWE luminary passes. I get it. I really do. It just, like I said, it felt like a gut punch, especially after seeing how prominent he was in the show. Anyway, Like I said, I give the whole show a 5. Overall, very good show. I definitely recommend it. I recommend anything involving the Horsemen, the Freebirds and the Von Erichs. It's one of the, like I said, one of the great feuds of all time. Jimmy Garvin, Iceman, King Parsons, great wrestlers. Cool seeing a guy like Johnny Mantell, who even at this time was later in his career, but still very relevant. Neat. It was also cool to see the Super Destroyers, which I knew as the Long Riders. I'm more familiar with them as that. So just a fun show all in all, other than the announcement. I definitely recommend going back and watching that. And with all that being said, please hit the like button, share, comment, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you watch to the end here, put Iron Claw down in the comments in respect of David and all the rest of the Von Erichs that have passed. With all this being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.